And welcome back to the Boundary Corner podcast with my partners Brian Siegler, Jonathan Talley, and Sheldon Moss. I'm Curtis Wilson. And this episode is brought to you by Jeremy Counts at the Main Street Pharmacy in Blacksburg. If you love this podcast, the Hokies, the town of Blacksburg, make sure you're supporting Main Street Pharmacy when you go to town.
Whether you need prescriptions, a tube of toothpaste, or just want to stop and say hello, let Jeremy and his team take care of you. The money you spend at Main Street Pharmacy goes towards the things you support. So next time you're in Blacksburg, head on down to 301 South Main Street. Fellas, we got a packed one tonight. I'm excited to bring this man on tonight. He is the owner and creator of Pick Six Previews, the most accurate preview magazine out there. He is Brett Ciancia. Brett, how are you doing tonight?
Hey guys, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be back on with you guys. Probably our fourth straight season, but this is a special season here, the end of an era, 2023. When you look across the conference landscape and the playoff bracket changing, it's a little bit of nostalgia this time around. So excited to break it down with you guys, and yeah, excited to get into it.
Yeah, we've got the Pac-12 kind of dismantling there, and we've got the ACC more or less on life support here. So it's definitely an interesting time to talk a little preview, talk a little college football, and kind of see what the Hokie season looked like, and kind of what the ACC schedule is kind of stacking up for the Hokies this year. So let's go ahead and jump right into it, Brett. We looked at the magazine. We love what you wrote there. Very, very insightful information about the Hokies. But let's start with some of the weapons that the Hokies added on offense, pretty much at every skill position. But success for this team is probably going to begin and end with the quarterback. That room now has Kyron Drones, along with returning starter Grant Wells. Regardless of who wins this job, how much additional production must come out of that quarterback position this year for you to feel that the Hokies could become more of a middle-of-the-pack offense versus kind of where you have them right now, which is kind of that bottom 2 or 3?
Yeah, well, that's certainly an area of concern last year, and definitely needs some improvement. You look back statistically, second worst in the conference in a lot of the key metrics I look at, passing-wise, QB rating, per attempt. So, and touchdown to pick ratio, I think he was a solid 9-9, 1-to-1 ratio. It's not going to get it done in the ACC. So, yeah, that's a big area that's needed to improve. And there was a limitation along with pretty much pick your spot last year on the offense. Unfortunately, it was one of the worst Virginia Tech offenses I've ever graded. And I think they ended up third worst in Power 5 overall. So that's certainly the most important position, but they have a lot to clean up across the board.
Absolutely. And, last year, you had Brad Glenn and Joe Rudolph, two guys who had been offensive coordinators in the past. And, you mentioned in the magazine, they moved on. Glenn heading to Cincinnati as an offensive coordinator, Rudolph moving up to Notre Dame. But now there's going to be more of a focus on Bowen's Moorhead RPO spread type system. And of the metrics that you review, we feel that if OL offensive line run push improves, that this offense is going to have a lot more success. For you, as you look through your metric, which one sticks out to say, if the Hokies are better, that one's going to be better?
Yeah, well, I like your answer, actually. I think it's got to start with the offensive line. When you look at them last year, one of the worst offensive lines statistically in the country. I have my, like you mentioned, offensive line run push and my pass protection sack rate. They were one of only 3 in Power 5 to place in the bottom, outside of number 100. So, along with Iowa and Boston College, some of the worst offensive line play in the country. So, got to improve there. That's step number one. But for this big RPO offense, another one I'll throw in there will be the explosive plays. I think that's huge in a wide open spread attack. Bowen, you talked about Joe Moorhead. They come from that old those Penn State teams with Trace McSorley. They were blowing off huge explosive passes. They had Saquon Barkley, ripping off long yardage runs. So along with offensive line improvement, I want to see some explosiveness return because it was really stuck in the mud last year.
Definitely. Pivoting to our next point, when you talk in your outlook, you talk about there weren't enough, or don't want to quote you if I'm wrong. You said there weren't enough overnight fixes in the offense to imagine a drastic change or drastic better offense or better unit. The Hokies took six portal offensive transfers. Now, with that being said, was that not enough players? Maybe not enough quality players. What kind of brought you to that outlook?
Yeah, so I guess the quantity might be there with those 6 guys, but when you look at the ratings, they didn't rate anywhere near the top 15 of the transfer classes. And I think it's a little bit of uncertainty. So these guys might turn out to be incredible. I know that Tootin had a ton of production at the the NCAA, the FCS level. So he could be a star. We'll see. And then with Drones, I mean, he was recruited to Baylor. I think he was a high 3, maybe a 4-star, dual threat. I mean, he led a state title in Texas. That's a pretty good resume builder. So he's got a high ceiling too. It's just a little uncertain for me. And I guess it's all comparative too. I think that these are all good players, but when you look at some of the other transfer additions across the conference, they are former starters, even former all-conference guys at other places. So maybe it's just, I should have said, maybe more proven at other places because these guys certainly have potential.
Now, I would say, I mean, I'm glad to hear you say that. Now, you did throw us a little bit of love. We did pick up Allie Jennings from Old Dominion, and he did make your all-transfer team. So we're pretty excited about that. I was glad to see you throw us a little bit of love on that. So hoping that can translate on the field.
Yeah, well, it's been such a crazy offseason. It was last year, too, with the transfer portal boom. I felt that, for my preview book, I wanted to add an all-transfer team, a new feature. Everyone's familiar with the all-ACC or all-SEC teams, but I put in an all-transfer team so you can start to map where all these players are going. And Virginia Tech represented there on the offense.
Yeah, so Brett, looking big picture now, one thing I like about your previews is that you include a 5 and 10 year trend in recruiting, and also game grades to kind of give a long-term look at the health of the program. I think this is a bit of a sour spot for Virginia Tech fans because of the regression that the program has seen over the past few years. But do you think that Virginia Tech, is there a good reason to believe that this program can get back to being a consistent top 25 team, even if it kind of takes a few years to kind of get there?
Well, yeah, I think that's definitely possible. I think that Virginia Tech as a program definitely has a top 25 ceiling. I mean, they could definitely be in there. I don't know if you meant recruiting or overall, but really in both, because first with recruiting, the first thing I ever look at is geography. I think that's key in recruiting. It always will be. And they're based in that DMV area, that southeast of the country, where there's more and more high school talent popping up. And they have a coach now with Brent Pry. I had a chance to interview him last spring, and he said his number one concern was returning the importance of in-state recruiting. It had been kind of looked away in the prior regime. So all that to say, I think they definitely can be consistent top 25 recruiters going forward. And with the right staff and the right schemes, a top 25 recruiting class should translate to a top 25 caliber football team. So, I'm a little bit on the younger side. So growing up, all I knew was the Frank Beamer era and solid defenses, great secondaries, DBU, they got some consideration there. To me, Virginia Tech is a power program and certainly has that ceiling. It's just a matter of getting back. It feels weird placing them so low in the conference, and I think it's a matter of time until they're back in that ACC top 5 competing.
Yeah, we right there with you, man. We feel weird too. We want to get up out of there. But yeah, so the loss of longtime starter Dax Hollifield, we feel like he was here for about 20 years, for how long he was at Virginia Tech, but he's moved on now. And we're seeing more athletic linebackers in that room. Pry and Marv have started to get players that are more of their type of players in. Would it surprise you to see a big jump in that defense and in that room, production in that room, with them getting more athletic players and longer players?
No, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I mean, I'm based out of Pennsylvania, so I was a little familiar with what he did at Penn State. It was some of the best defenses year in and year out. And really one of the key points of it was how aggressive they were, attacking and aggressive, I'd call it. And it's funny when you look at my stat chart there for defense, one of the only bright spots last year, top 40 national, was the negative play rate, which is directly tied to that aggressive nature, that blitz happy, making plays behind the line of scrimmage, causing havoc. So I think that's all part of Pry's DNA. And now with a second-year coach bonus, that wouldn't surprise me. So I'm not exactly sure on which personnel is going to step up, what starter or new new emerging player it'll be. I know it will be someone, and there's enough firepower there to find a starting 11 and find a starting linebacker trio. So I think you're in good shape defensively.
Yeah, yeah, definitely excited to see what Lawson can do as a full-time starter. Maybe see Keller step into that Mike position with Dax out there. So it's going to be an exciting year to look at that. But let's move up a level here and talk about the defensive line. You talked a lot in the book about the D-line departures at the defensive end position and the lack of rush production last year. Tech ranked actually 94th nationally in sack rate in 2022. But one of the bigger offseason portal additions was Antoine Powell-Rowland Jr. coming over from Florida. We know veterans like Cole Nelson, C.J. McCray, they're going to play a role there. But it looks like Powell-Rowland's kind of the guy to take up a lot of the snaps that Tywan Garbett had last year. Do you think he can have a similar impact for the Hokies in a full-time role, considering that he showed a big flash in a more specialized role at Florida?
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to remember who he was competing against on the roster of Florida. It's blue chippers everywhere, top 100, top 50 guys everywhere. So despite not being a full-time starter there, I think he's still got valuable experience. No knock on him. So, yeah, that's potential. I like what they have at defensive tackle with some familiar names coming back. So, yeah, there's definitely places to build around, and I agree with you on that.
That's awesome to hear. Now I want to have a little come Jesus moment. So you mentioned a big win would be bowl eligibility this year. We'd like it, obviously, but I think as we look back at 2022, with one of the worst offenses, not on just G5 or P5 in the whole country, and a solid but not a great defense, the Hokies blundered 3 games. They blundered ODU. They blundered NC State. They blundered Georgia Tech, and they didn't get to play UVA, who they probably would have been a significant favorite over. So my question, due to the tragedy that happened at UVA, but here's what I say. Based on this schedule, is this more of a big win, or is this more of an expected progression where the close games flip the other way this year?
Well, I'll stick to what I was saying, just because coming off of last year, I mean, it was a pretty brutal season win-loss record-wise. I think that, the Old Dominion game, you really fumbled that one away. Literally, I saw that snap fly over the holder's head. That's a 10-point swing, man. That's a 10-point swing. And, you mentioned the other 2 close ones, but there were a lot of black eyes, too. I mean, getting beat down by West Virginia, blown out several weeks. Really, the offensive limitations was what really weighed down their grades last year. So I think to get to 5, in this case, 6 wins for bowl eligibility, that shows that you fixed the offense. That shows that the defense made a progression from average to above average. So I think all those things are wins. And you also have to factor in you're playing a couple Power 5s in the non-conference this year with Purdue and Rutgers. Towards the bottom of the Power 5, yes, but still, I mean, those are Power 5 opponents. Marshall had a great defense last year. So, I think that getting a bowl season in year 2 is a win. I think you got to start to stack those, start to get momentum because – it's rare to go from 3 wins to 10 wins. You got to get that intermediate year, that building block year. This is a good spot to try and get to 6 or 7 plus wins.
Definitely. When you talk about those wins and trying to get there, one name that we as Hokie fans don't want to see is FSU, which is one of our opponents this year. You actually had FSU favored to win the ACC and head to the college football playoffs this year. So they're returning a lot of production on both sides of the ball, trending positive in a lot of matrix. That said, is there one particular matrix that gives you like a little bit of pause that, they can't close it out or they may kind of fumble that away?
Well, I feel pretty strong with the Florida State pick. I think it's a little bit of a surprise to see them in the playoff bracket. I got a lot of attention for that. It wasn't by design. I just truly believe it. Start with last year, 2022. That was really their breakthrough year statistically. You look at all my numbers and metrics. They were top 10, top 20 in everything. Offense, defense, pick your number. That was good in itself. But then they bring back the number 1 most returning production in America. The entire roster coming back. Some key NFL decisions that decided to come back to Florida State on their defensive line. Jordan Travis, dual threat quarterback. And then the last piece is that not only that, those 2 factors, but they really excel again in the transfer portal. Another top 5 transfer class. And Norvell, he doesn't just sign them; he really develops the transfers into all conference guys. So while Clemson ignored the portal, Florida State's embraced it and really bolstered their roster up. So, yeah, I feel pretty good about this Florida State team. Definitely to hit their 9.5 win total. That's one of my best bets of the year. Winning the conference will still be tough against Clemson, but yeah, I think it's a pretty strong team. And if they survive the ACC 12-1, that means a playoff bid.
So, in keeping with the ACC opponents that Tech will face this year, you've got the Pitt Panthers, who have been a thorn in the side of Virginia Tech for the past few years. They're an interesting team to watch, I think. Obviously, they're a very good developmental program under Narduzzi. His bread and butter is defense, but they do lose a few key defensive players this season, as well as their running back, Abanikanda. Do you think that their success will depend on Phil Jerkovic's health? And do you see their defense being able to kind of maintain where they've been the past few years coming into 2023?
Yeah, well, with the defense, it's funny. I was talking to Coach Narduzzi, and he was very adamant that he invented his scheme, and everyone else is copying him. So he's the originator, and everyone else just drives a worse version of his car, as he likes to say. But yeah, I think, and you know what? There's some truth to that. I mean, look at how they reload every year. They place in the top 5 in sacks every year. One of the most disruptive in the backfield every year. So. All jokes aside, he does have quite a track record defensively. Now, it is more transition than usual. More stars are gone. But when you have a coach that's successful on one side of the ball, I tend to side with them. So I think that they're going to be fine defensively. I like the transfer addition of Dracovic. He was really strong in 2020 and 2021 before his injury. And then last year had one of the worst offensive lines in the country in front of him and got knocked out of the year again. So I think not only is he with a better offensive line here at Pitt, he's back with Frank Signetti, who was the coordinator up at BC when he had his best season. So all that to say, I have them 4th in the ACC. Outside the top 25, though, there's still a lot of questions there. Definitely a winnable game for Virginia Tech, but I do have them all the way up there at number 4.
I like hearing that. I like hearing that you have confidence in potentially us taking care of Pitt this year. All right, I'm going to flip to another ACC school. Let's talk about Louisville. It seems like they are getting a huge bump from the hire of Jeff Brom by everybody in the country. And that said, there is a lot of question marks for this team for Louisville, though, despite the optimism with him coming back and the success he had at Purdue. You got them 6. We feel they probably could be as high as 5 due to their easy schedule, or if things just don't click, maybe as low as 11. What metric really gave you pause to say they can finish in the upper half of the ACC?
Well, you touched on it. Its schedule was a key driver here for Louisville. But schedule aside, I think Coach Brom's a proven offensive guy. He's got a fun offense. It's a widespread passing offense. And he brought in 2 former quarterbacks. So these guys are really familiar with him. One's a former starter with Jack Plummer. And then Indiana quarterback of the year or whatever at the high school level, Brady Allen. So he's got his quarterbacks coming in, a top 15 transfer haul too, and then also some good talent on offense to build around. So now here's the pessimist spin is that, yeah, it's a coaching transition season. There's a big talent drain on defense that they have to deal with. But yeah, I think the middle of the pack of the ACC, there's a lot of thin margin there. You could argue a team, like you said, from 5th all the way to 10th. It's a tight pack. But their schedule was the difference here. They have definitely the easiest in the ACC. They avoid the top 3, and I'm calling that Florida State, Clemson, and UNC. So they avoid all 3 of them, and they play all 7 of my bottom 7. So schedule-wise, huge bonus. And, it's a whole new world now without the Atlantic and Coastal divisions. The schedules are all scattered around, so you got to find these gems like this where they could even be an average team and go 8-4.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what we were looking at, too. Like, we saw the schedule, like, okay, that makes sense why they're getting a big bump here, especially with Brom coming in. So, definitely could see, like I said, we look at it, we could see them 5. We could see them 5. We could also see them 11, just depending on how the defense stacks up, whether they can stay healthy. But that schedule is definitely going to give them an easy path to 8, like you said. Let's pivot over to UVA, though. Looking at that team, defense was the kind of the lone bright spot for that unit in 2022. Up front, they got 4 starters back, but they lost both starting corners. and an all ACC linebacker. Are you expecting a regression year for the defense? And if that's the case, maybe even an uglier overall year 2 than their first year with Tony Elliott at the helm?
Yeah, well, last year they were all defense. When you look at their stat profile, when you watch them, they couldn't get anything done offensively, but it was a solid top 20 defense. And the problem here with 2023 is it's twofold. Number one, I don't see a fix on offense. I think that's going to struggle again. But number two, I don't think that the defense is proven like it was last year. You lost their top 3 defenders. And worse, it wasn't fifth-year guys that have exhausted their eligibility and heading to the pros. It was they transferred to other teams. It's hard to see that happen. So you had 3-time All-ACC Nick Jackson, quarterback of the defense there at backer. He's gone to Iowa. He's going to be the starter over there. And then Fentrell Cypress, number 1 cornerback transfer in the entire country, heads over to Florida State. So their best guys got poached, and I just don't see any huge fixes. So I have them slated for dead last in the ACC. And what is that? 66 out of 69. That's 4th worst in the Power 5. So looks like another tough year for UVA.
Yeah, and it does seem that way. Even as we follow it, even on the recruiting trail, there's not been many wins for UVA this year. All right, we got one more before we let you out of here, and that is one of the out-of-conference opponents you mentioned. And the reason we're mentioning it is because all 4 of us will be heading to Blacksburg for that game, and it's Purdue. And let's talk about them. Ryan Walters, great job as the Illinois defensive coordinator last year. This is his first full-time head coaching gig. And he walks into what is a slightly below-average defense, and the portal wreaked absolute havoc on their line. 4 transfers out. The rush defense was a little bit above last year, a little bit above average, and great at holding explosive plays down. With all these losses, are you expecting that to be the metric that just takes the hit in 2023?
Yeah, I think that they're in for a transition season, and not in a good way for Purdue. If you did a blind resume on Purdue, you would never have predicted that that'd be a conference champion or division champion. They won the West last year. I don't know how. It doesn't stack up. What is that? They were graded 44th in Power 5 despite winning the West. So, I have them all the way down in 6th place out of 7 in the Big Ten West. Now, I do think that Ryan Walters, he's a great defensive mind. I had a chance to talk with him too, and he's coming in really confident into the Big Ten. He was saying how he knows the Big Ten. It doesn't matter that he's a new-time head coach. And now it doesn't matter for your matchup. You're not a conference opponent, never played him. So, I think it's going to be a tough transition season for Purdue, and definitely a winnable game there that you guys will get to witness in Lane Stadium.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that one. That's going to be a big game. I feel like, first kind of big Power 5 out of conference that we've had in a little bit at home. It's going to be interesting because this schedule for the Hokies this year isn't a lot of marquee matchups. So that Purdue game is kind of circled for a lot of us. So should be a lot of fun. But let's talk about the offensive guy that they brought in. We got Graham Harrell there brought in to run his air raid offense. And they went out and got quarterback Hudson Card from Texas. Is there an offensive metric that you're expecting to improve the most within that system compared to what they had last year under Braum?
Yeah. So it is a little bit similar of an offense. It's both can be pass heavy. Graham Howell running his version of the air raid, slightly different than Coach Braum's, but in the same family of offense. So probably a similar stat profile. I think the one that might improve might be quarterback rating. I think that maybe on a per play basis, maybe they'll get more efficient. But Hudson Card, he was a former top 50 recruit. Started some games at Texas, had to go against 2 5-stars down there. So it's not exactly the usual backup quarterback. I think he's a solid starter, probably in the upper half of Big Ten quarterbacks. So, you're going to get a solid team. But, again, it's only going to be his second start. It's his first road start at Purdue. So I think it's, again, a winnable game for you guys.
Absolutely. And, he did have some starting time down at Texas, but again, whole new system, whole new place, whole new environment. Brett, we know you were a busy man. You jumped from the Spurs Up podcast straight over to the Boundary Corner podcast. We really appreciate you taking your time. We know you're now headed over to the Big Red podcast with Nebraska. So you continue to make your rounds around college football. Keep doing what you do, because we love the magazine. It's a great read every year to not only familiarize ourselves with the way you feel the ACC is going and our Hokies, but also the rest of the country.
Yeah, well, thanks a ton for the praise. Thanks for having me on, and a huge respect for the Hokie fans out there. One of the most passionate in the country, definitely in the ACC. I've seen it firsthand. I was down 2009 in Lane Stadium for the Nebraska-Virginia Tech game, a random matchup there. Sure brings back some memories for you guys. Danny Cole running down the sideline.
Oh, yeah.
But I want to get back down to Lane Stadium eventually, and get to see that experience again. One of the best in the country. So big respect to the fan base and to you guys for putting on a great product here, covering the Hokies. And best of luck this season.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate it, Brett. Thanks, man. All righty, fellas. Before we get into more topics tonight, we are going to take a quick pause for a message from our digital partners.
As we take a quick break, we'd like to tell you about getting your free website report from our digital partner, Grassroots Digital Marketing Studio. They'll tell you how your website ranks on Google, on-site SEO, and social media. No commitment to buy anything. You can get your free report by visiting grassrootsdigitalstudio.com/free-website-report. Now back to the episode.
All righty, and we are back. Before we jump into the other topics tonight, y'all, we rolled through that. I don't know. We got every question in 30 minutes and less. So
hey, we did it.
Quick.
We did it. We did that quick. But let's think about some of the stuff he said. The Hokies, the opponents, anything that caught y'all, any of y'all start, anything that caught y'all right offhand. If you're out there listening and you got something he said that you don't agree with or you agree with completely, put it in the comments. We'll talk about that too. Who wants to fire first?
All right. Did Narduzzi invent the attacking 4-3?
He said he did.
He said he did. It's a Linus of D's what he is.
He keep on reloading on that defense.
He's a hell of a developmental coach. I'll give him that. I'm inventing the attacking 4-3 though. I will not pass that on to him.
No, I just want to beat him. That's all I want. I just want to win, man. Y'all
can admit, everybody on our schedule, beating him is fun because that man gets so pissed off. I remember in Lane, last time me and Brian were there, 2019, we were in stands across from him. You could just see him like upset the whole game because they couldn't move the ball in the rain. We scored early. He knew he had no chance, and he just was cursing the rest the whole time. Like, he is the funnest guy to watch because as an opposing fan, it's like when you beat them, it's like no one's fault but the referees. Not his fault.
Well, remember he was bragging heading in. He's like, we played the whiteout at Penn State, and we didn't jump off sides. We're not going to jump off sides in Lane. And what?
First series,
first series, second.
And
I think it was 3 total the whole game.
So,
yeah, I mean,
that was fun.
Oh, it was so fun. You were in school then, man. Gosh.
I remember that game. I was working that one. That was so much fun.
So what caught your eye, Sheldon? I mean, you've read, we know you're our data guy. So looking through the magazine, anything you agree, don't agree with, kind of see where he's leaning to when it comes to Hokies opponents?
I don't know if there's anything I disagreed with too much. I will say one point of agreement. I don't know how Purdue won their division this year. They were 8-6. The metrics didn't like them that much. I know Tech fans kind of look at Purdue and say like, "Oh, that's a reigning division champion. Like, gotta watch out." I mean, they were okay last year. They're getting a new head coach. I think that's a pretty winnable game because I know that some Tech fans are kind of worried about that one. So I would agree with him that Purdue's a team that's a little bit of a flash in the pan last year.
Yeah, it was. But the Big Ten West was dreadful last year. I mean, Iowa, like we talk about our offense, the Iowa offense last year was, oh my God. Like if we would have had the Iowa offense, we might not have won a game last year.
Well, at least we had some explosive plays. Like we had some explosive plays here and there that
nothing
kind of buoyed us a little bit here or there. Like the problem with us last year is that if it wasn't an explosive play, we weren't doing shit.
Yeah, but here's the thing that Brett said that this is where I wish we'd have had him for 20 more minutes. He was talking about like the West Virginia blowout and a couple blowouts. Y'all, we watched it. West Virginia was a game literally until the early part of the fourth quarter. It won't like they took us behind the shed in the first half and the game was over. That was a 16-10 game walking to the fourth.
That was our cornerbacks We had 2, and they were gassed by the mid third quarter.
So big disagreement there. The Pitt game, which people look at as, oh, you got blown out. Y'all know about the Pitt game. Y'all know the pass was over the middle. We were going the fumble, and then Abaconda. But I'm this when it comes to Pitt. You look at them. Pitt's one of these people like Sheldon. You watch their development, right? But they're never like this. They're good, and then they have the dips. They haven't had a significant dip since 2018. They've been 38, 20. They had the elite defense last year. They were in the 20s last year. Is this the year they regress back down into the middle of the pack with the defense? Because it happens. It happens to just about everybody unless you are getting elite talent consistently.
I think it's possible. I mean, like I said, obviously depending on, Jerkovic's health, anything can happen there. I mean, they've been, I would say the second best team in the ACC outside of Clemson the past, 3 or so years.
Oh yeah.
Narduzzi typically, he usually maximizes the talent that he has, not so much offensively always, but like you said, usually when you recruit at kind of like that mid-range, like 35 to 40 level, you're gonna, fall back to earth eventually. I think going 9-4 last year, 11-3 the year before that, it's highly possible that they're due for a regression, maybe just kind of some stumbles. But still, there's no reason to think that they won't be at least, at the bare minimum, I think a 7-win team, because that's really what they've been the past 5 seasons.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to fall off the map. I think their defense might drop just enough where there'll be kind of that average middle of the pack ACC team, kind of that 6-7 range, and not in the 3-4 range that we've seen the last 3 years.
All right, what about you, Tally? You gotta have something to say. You always got something to say.
The only thing that I can say I disagree with when he talked about the which he touched on it a little bit when I asked him, the offensive starter or the offensive transfers. I just feel like it's a much different offense than we had last year. And with all the games that you guys are talking about, we had a chance in a lot of those games, whether it was the coaching just wasn't where it needed to be, whether it was a playmaker wasn't there when we needed them, whether it was quarterback play. It may have been one or two things, but we were in a lot of those games, and I feel like we brought some people in that can push us over the hump to win a couple of those games. Because if we do win 3 of those games last year or 4, however many, we have a much different discussion of what year 2 looks like. So y'all know how I feel about this year. I've been saying it before any depth charts drop, before I seen anybody in pads. I got a good feeling about this year. What my good feeling is, hell, I don't know. I just think it's gonna be better than we've seen. I think we're gonna make a bowl game. So
I think what you see, Tally, is, and we all see it, and we all look at it, is year 1 there was not much roster turnover.
Mm-hmm.
Year 2 it has been a ton of roster turnover, including those 3 guys right there coming on. And again, I respect Brett because Brett looks at he doesn't lean that much into the portal stuff because to his point, they produced here. Can they produce here? So he doesn't, it's not like the big metric, because if you take a look at the way it's kind of shaped out, we had a good transfer class, not a great, but I think the way he shapes it is, it's almost like doing an unknown commodity, right?
Oh yeah.
I don't know what Ollie Jennings is going to be like on Virginia Tech, what Jalen Lane is going to look like.
And he gave us some good credit for Jennings, obviously, but I think it's more of there's a lot of potential with what Drones can do, being a former 4-star coming in. If he wins the starting job, there's a lot of potential what Tuden can do if what he did at NCA&T translates to Blacksburg. Same with Feld and same with Lane. So when you look at those pieces, there's a lot of potential there that could be realized, or it could be more middle of the pack. So that's the question.
When
is it going to be middle of the pack, or is it going to level us up a little bit?
When you think about everything, nothing's guaranteed. When you talk about transfers, you can have somebody that was starting at Alabama but gets in trouble and then goes to, I don't know, Tennessee, and could be a totally different player. So when you talk about, it's a sure thing, it's never a sure thing. It just comes down to whoever's writing the article, do they trust the coach that has the player? So I think with our coaching staff, it's a lot of unknown. So people like Brett, people like in the college landscape just don't know what Pride and the staff can do, just on the field. We're saying the right things. We're recruiting pretty good. Me, myself, I think they're going to be fine. I think, again, I'm pretty optimistic about this year. I think that, again, none of this matters till we hit the field. But from what I see, I think that we're going to take a step forward. So I hope I'm right. I can't handle another year like last year.
Yeah. Also, regarding Curtis's point about the roster turnover, I was running the numbers today and found that Virginia Tech has turned over 40% of their scholarship roster from last year.
Mm.
So, I mean, that kind of shows you what the coaches thought about the talent level last year. And
that is
yes. And credit to our friend Pete B on Virginia Tech Twitter for this one. I think we had 26 portal entrants this offseason. Only 4 of them went to Power 5 schools. So
that was
what we're getting rid of. Like we're not losing that much.
It's one of those things, and that was a big point. It was 4 guys who went. It was
Chapman,
Cincinnati, UNC, Kent State is where. Who's the 4th?
Caleb Smith was in there.
Caleb, but he didn't.
But he retired.
Yeah.
So really 3 legitimate, and that does, and it's a great point, Sheldon. You talk about the turnover, but it's who you moved out. And it's something we hear Brent Pry preach all the time. I need competition. I need guys who are going to compete. And Tally, Brian, y'all both played at a collegiate level. The man you across from in school, who you're practicing against every day, if it's a pushover, there's no challenge for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you hear all the stories. Anybody, even if you've never played sports, you hear about, oh, this person ran scout team and he was amazing and he did this and he had a great look. Like, it makes a difference just, for the practice competition that you see. If you have a quarterback that can imitate, I don't know, Michael Vick, which of course would be hard, but if you're going up against a quarterback like that and you're able to imitate it, like it's a big deal. So I just don't think that we had enough players that could have a significant piece on the team last year. But this year, I think it's going to be a little different.
Oh, Brian's favorite point just got brought up by Jim West VT.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about it a lot. He makes the point here. He doesn't think that Tyler Bowen and Rudolph mix very well. You could throw Brad Glenn in that as well. For being honest, I think there were way too many cooks in the kitchen last year as far as what we needed to do, how we needed to do it. We saw some heavy into what Rudolph has traditionally ran to start the season. And then as we got further into it, it looked like there was some of Bowen's hand on it, some of Glenn's hand on it. Like, you hear whispers here and there about who's doing what, who's calling what. Like, I think it was just too many guys that had experience being an offensive coordinator in there with a guy that was doing it for the first time, even though his name, the title next to him is offensive coordinator. So
right.
I think it's going to be some addition by subtraction in that front where, the philosophy is going to be consistent and the philosophy is going to be filtered down from one individual to the rest of the coaches on that offensive side of the ball, and less people in Bowen's ear as the year goes along.
100%. All right, we got some more Hokie stuff to talk, but I do want to kind of flip and talk about this. Brett mentioned at the beginning, sort of a nostalgia year, and it effectively is the death of the Pac-12 with Oregon and Washington heading to the Big Ten, Colorado, which was the first domino to fall, Arizona, Utah, and Arizona all heading to the Pac-12. And it's really funny because me and Tally talked a few minutes yesterday. Is like, okay, the Big East died. Okay, Big East was around from 1991. Literally, us growing up, and Sheldon, you're a little bit younger than us, so I know it's going to hit a little bit different. But for me, Brian, and Jonathan here, and Tally here, the Pac-12 had been literally a part of our life. Like, remember, 8 or 9 years old, they show like UCLA in the Rose Bowl or USC, and that's gone. It's gone. We're never going to see that again. And just what are y'all's thoughts, and whoever wants to lead, what are your thoughts about what this realignment's going through? in general with this happening.
I mean, I think it's bittersweet here a little bit. You know, the Pac-12 has been around what 100 years, over 100 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a flash in the pan conference or kind of a mix and match. It's something that has had some sort of core group for a very long period of time. So from that front, it's a little sad. But you know, this is something I think everyone saw coming, especially once the last round of realignment started. You know, once you lose kind of an anchor piece like USC, the writing is on the wall.
Yeah.
But you know, I think it's going to be all right. I'm more worried now about where the Hokies can land in all of this than about what saving college football or whatever that means. Like, I just want to make sure that the Hokies stay relevant. That's really the only thing I care about at this point.
True.
Well, I care about two things. I care about the Hokies remaining relevant, and give me this damn NCAA football game, so I can go build my own team and put them where I want them to be, and win some championships. So, EA Sports, stop pushing it back. Let's get it right. Pay whoever you got to pay, so I can get on the game and kick Siegel's ass.
Sheldon, what
We'll
you
see.
got, man? What you got, Sheldon? I know you had some thoughts about this in general.
Yeah, look, I mean, for me, it's all about perspective, right? You mentioned how, you know, I'm a lot younger than you guys, so the college football I experienced was different from the college football you guys experienced, right? Like,
Yep.
I did not grow up with the Southwest Conference, and so because of that, I don't really care about the Southwest Conference. But, you know, that ended in the 90s, and now we're seeing the Pac-12 probably going to fold pretty soon. I think the nature of college sports is change, and I think sometimes people have a hard time accepting it. That's not to say that what's happening right now in college football is necessarily for the better, but change has been the nature of college sports forever, and people have always talked about, you know, the influence of money. It's all about the TV ratings. There's no heart in the game anymore. I mean, people have been saying this stuff for decades. You know, if you go back deep enough, even in the 1930s, believe it or not. So I try to have perspective. At the end of the day, the question I ask myself is, one, will there be football in 2024? Yes. And two, will I be rooting for Virginia Tech in 2024? Also, yes. So with that in mind, at the end of the day, like I'm still going to go to the games. I'm still going to watch football. I'm still going to, you know, go to PKs with my friends afterwards. So I try to have perspective and realize that, you know, it's not going anywhere. I personally think college football will be fine. It's going to look a lot different. I have no idea what's going to happen in the next 5 or 6 years, but it's still football, and we love that.
Now, I got a question for you, Sheldon. This is on a little bit of a different level, a little pivot here for you. Because we know you know a lot of people, man. You know, we definitely happy you're on the show. We know you know a lot of people. We know you work a lot of different places. But you're you know some cool guys on Twitter, or what are we calling it, X now?
X.
You know
Twitter.
some cool guys on there. And a certain account that you know is really, really good at making memes and different videos and things like that. So I'm wondering, have you talked to that account or that gentleman or lady about some of this conference realignment and have some of those videos and stuff queued up yet?
Nope, I plead the fifth.
Okay.
All right. He's pleading the fifth, and that's going to go no further concerning the death of the Pac-12. But let's talk about this. It came out yesterday and today. ACC potentially adding Stanford, Cal, and SMU.
Dumb.
If y'all can hear from my voice, I'm not very excited about that at all, because they screwed the pooch when, if you actually would have attempted to go after brand names, more known names, teams that have been in the Rose Bowl in the last few years, the Nike team, one of the, you know, Washington, who has a 75,000 seat stadium, you might could have renegotiated your contract to something actually viable. And I sit here, I think we speak a year from today because, you know, I can't remember who it was exactly, but somebody out there put up that if you're going to leave a conference, the ACC's particular, the 15th of August, you have to be advising. I don't think that's coming this year. But in my opinion, I think realignment's going to happen again. I think the ACC's dead in a year. And I mean dead. Effectively, there's a date set when multiple teams are leaving. What about y'all?
I mean, let me circle back real quick on the Stanford, Cal, SMU.
Oh yeah, you'll start there.
We did an episode called Loose Partnership after the Pac-12 and ACC and all of that came out after the last round of realignment.
Mm-hmm.
And we said this loose partnership isn't going to mean shit. There's going to be teams that jump, and that's the only thing that's going to matter. Then we saw USC and UCLA jump. So the loose partnership was always dumb. We said at the time, if you're going to do something like that, you need to go ahead and merge the two conferences. And that's what probably should have happened at that time if you wanted some form of the Pac-12 and ACC to survive in the next 5 years. That being said, I don't think the ACC is dead in a year. But if they lose FSU and they lose Clemson, they are going to be on life support.
All right.
Yep.
So whatever you take of that's where we are. So if that is the thing that precipitates another 6 teams that jump ship, then yes, the ACC will be dead. But I think they're going to unfortunately hang on for a little bit longer after that. And I'm hoping that we're one of the next round that gets out if FSU and Clemson jump ship in the next year.
Sheldon?
Yeah, I don't know where Florida State could go because, like, I don't know if the SEC wants to expand more, and they also have the ESPN contract, so they'd essentially be negotiating against themselves for the payout. Maybe I'm wrong. I kind of flip-flopped on this a little bit. Part of me thinks like it's impossible to get out of the GOR because of the absurd amount it cost, but also part of me thinks that the state of Florida is going to have some judge that can just lawyer their way out of it and kind of give FSU a free pass, which, given the state of Florida, would not really surprise me. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of politics in this, but like I said, I just don't. I've flip-flopped both ways, and I just don't really have a clear opinion at this point.
I'm kind of the same way. I mean, I don't really have a clear opinion. I know that the ACC talking about adding Stanford and Cal is probably stupid because, I mean, just thinking about travel time and other stuff like that, like that's just not a good fit. So I don't know.
It gives us an excuse.
It's not worth the bump to also factor in what you said, the additional travel time and everything else, and probably having to kill at least 1 or 2 non-rev sports to accommodate that.
That's true. Well, the only upside would be, excuses to stay up to like 2 a.m. on Saturdays when Tech's out west.
I'll
be up
fan.
till 2.
Yeah,
I had to sleep in tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm a Laker fan, so I watch games late at night anyway, and I'm very disappointed while watching them. So I'm used to that. But when I think about it, when you think about just say, I don't know, freaking softball or baseball having a game on a Wednesday in California, like what is it, Palo Alto or something?
Palo Alto.
How do you do that? How do you make that work? I'm not the guy that knows how to fix that, but how do you make it work?
That's all football. No other sport matters.
Nope.
See what Jim's got here again. Cal, Stanford, SMU to keep the association with Notre Dame. With ESPN, I can't see them pushing for the SEC ACC merger since they merged their property. I don't see the first one makes sense, makes a lot of logical sense. The second one doesn't make sense to me. But the issue is this, and we talk about GOR, and Sheldon brought up they can't get out of the GR. There's one way the GRR ends if the conference devolves. You need 8. And the SEC is going to expand because eventually the Big Ten numbers are going to get up to 15, 20 million more. Tally you down in SEC country. They ain't the biggest fan of being the second most paid conference.
No, not at all.
That's going to happen. When that shifts, there's going to be 4 that goes to the south. There's going to be 2 that go up north, and there's going to be 2 that goes out west. And they're going to come in and say, we call for a vote of disillusionment. They're going to dissolve the conference. There is no ACC. There is no grant of rights. Brian, you said it the other day. We're guaranteed a landing spot, but I think we all want it to be one of the better landing spots and not the Big 12.
I just want to land somewhere so we can win 10 games or put me in the Sun Belt so we can win the championship. Put me in there. I mean, we going to a bigger playoff, right? We're going to a bigger playoff.
We go into a bigger playoff,
Let's
but
go undefeated,
they're probably
man.
going to renegotiate how. Me and Curtis had talked about.
I don't want to go. I don't want to go to the Sun Belt. I'm joking around.
Okay,
about
make
that,
sure you're joking about that.
But I just, it's so much being thrown around right now. So many people are like up in arms about it. It's just like to hear what Shelton says is kind of how I am. It's like, am I going to watch football if it's being played? Yes.
Yeah.
Am I going to be rooting for the Hokies? Yes.
Yes.
Like, that's all I really know right now. All the other stuff, shit, I don't know what they're going to do.
I don't either, but I sit here, I like to speculate, I like to talk. I also want I want us to be in a conference that's getting paid, because we joke about the Sun Belt. You imagine getting $20 million a year? Hey, now go compete. Go compete. There's $20 million.
You won't get no recruits.
Huh?
You better have some good developers.
The conference you're recruiting again is getting 5 times that, or 4 times that.
And I think that's where the issue lies. And I think me and Brian discussed Friday. We had a little phone call, and let me tell you what the playoff they go. I think they go to 24. I think they go to 24, and then they look and say we're gonna have 3 divisions, or we're gonna have 4 divisions. You win a division in the Big Ten or the SEC, you get in the playoff. We'll figure out the other ones in a few years.
Yeah,
something crazy like that.
I wouldn't doubt it.
All righty, let's flip it over. Let's actually talk some fun stuff, Hokie-wise here, boys. Let's talk about a couple commitments. Let's start with the offensive tackle out of Macon, Georgia, Webb Davidson, 6'6", 290 pounds, 3-star rated by 247. Brian, y'all who had a chance to look at him, what do y'all think of him? I have not had much to dive into this kid yet.
Not a lot of tape out there that I could find, but I mean, I love the size, 6'6", 291. I mean, it's hard to argue with that as a tackle coming in. That's a Power 5 build. We talked about it the other day. I mean, if you got a guy with that type of size, he's got some of the athletic traits, I think you could get something out of that guy. So, like the pickup, I mean, it's not a flashy rating in terms of the recruiting sites out there, but solid Power 5 rating for a tackle, and with that size, I think we can work with him.
Yeah, and he's been apparently he's got something that they like, that probably Crook likes, because all of us who follow recruiting have heard his name for a little bit of time. There's been a lot of other names thrown out, and I guess they didn't move on him, or they weren't moved by him. But this guy, we heard about him a little while ago, and they made sure to keep him in the fold. So that is again, good size. I haven't watched, like Brian said, much film on him. There's not much film out there, but he's BMF.
He is. And if you want to know how big he is, take a look at the picture. It's on 247. He's standing next to 75. I think that's a kid out of Christiansburg who's like legitimately 6'8". Yeah. And he right there, just about eye to eye with him. Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk about the one nobody saw coming. I didn't see it. Y'all didn't see it until it literally dropped. We're going back to Texas, boys. We're going back to Texas.
Texas to VT.
Texas to VP. Out of Fort Worth, Texas, Keldon Ryan, 6'1", 195-pound quarterback, and 86 with offers from Arkansas, Baylor, Miami, Oklahoma State, Pitt, Penn State. Guy's got a lot of offers to be a mid-3. I know the comments are he was playing at a very bad school, and he's effectively transferred to a better school.
I mean, if you watch a little bit, I think I seen a little bit of highlights and a little bit of working out and stuff. When you see an offer list like that, because you can't just say, of course, like ratings do matter. People say they don't. They do. Ratings matter. But when you see an offer list like that, and then you see the rating, it just doesn't match up. But then when you watch like a little bit of his tape and what he's good at and what he does, you say, okay, shit, I can see a coach going to watch somebody else play and see him and be like, who the hell is that? You know what I'm saying? Which is probably how it happened. Or he started camping late, is why he doesn't have a bigger bump in the ratings. But again, he's a 2025 kid. He's got a long time, He's got a long time to get more offers, to get bigger, faster, stronger, to also, get a bump in ratings. So I'll be interested to see. I haven't dug into it a lot to see, like, yeah, that's our quarterback of the future, but I'll be interested to see kind of how his progression goes.
Absolutely.
All right, so I'm gonna say it. This guy is Pop Watson's skill set, but he's got much bigger size coming out of the high school. He's already 6'1", almost 200.
You got 2 more years too.
Going into his junior year of high school.
So what you're saying is potentially Pop skill set, potentially Drone's body.
Yeah, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'd like to see. And he really jumped off on tape. Obviously, he was playing on a team that wasn't very well. I don't know what the competition level was relative to that as well. I'm interested to see now that he's on a better team in a better conference in a better district down there. You know how his junior year shapes out, because if he goes out there and has a big junior year, you're going to see a bump to a 4-star, guaranteed.
Oh yeah. Did y'all see the video of him working out in the Virginia Tech shirt?
Yeah, that was back in like April.
Yeah, so apparently they've been on him for a while, but him working out in that Virginia Tech shirt, just again, when you're, I don't put a lot into like people working out or 7-on-7 stuff. For me, I'd rather see you in pads. But for a quarterback, just to see can he throw, like he's got some good mechanics and he can spin the ball. So it was good to see that.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so a couple more commits there. We've obviously got a few more places in the boat left. Obviously, I don't have this on the rundown, but I'm sure y'all saw it. Our buddy in Roanoke, our music man, Jason, actually texted to me and Brian this morning at 6:30. Chris Cole set to commit September 10th. The day after the Purdue game. We'll see how that goes. But let's talk about a few other things in camp. We're going to talk about a couple position battles as well. But I want to mention something that I listened to Coach Pry's interview last Thursday, the first one. And he mentioned they changed it up. Something he shared with us, that basically always evaluating, always looking to do things different, how they shape and shift things. And he mentioned for this particular fall camp, they're doing effectively 5 mini camps. 3 on, 1 off. Callie, Siegler, y'all went through college camps. Tell me what y'all like about this concept and what y'all hate about this concept of 3-and-1s up until the week of the 20th.
For me, I think he's they're trying to find ways to keep people healthy, because you're just getting a roster that I can say you semi-trust, and you got a lot of new guys in there. So I think they're trying to, I've seen them, which every college does ice baths and stuff like that. But probably talked about some of the guys not playing when he was on with us, talking about some of them not playing in the spring game. And you hate to see somebody go down in a game like that or even in fall practice. So I think that they're just trying to maneuver to make sure that we have as much camaraderie as possible, but as little injuries as possible. I think that's where you're getting 3 days on the field, 1 day off, and then so on and so forth. But when you say what don't you like about it, it's just the fear of the unknown for the most part. Like if you've never done that and you've never seen it, of course you're going to be kind of skeptical if something goes wrong. It's like, are we missing time? You need to get as many practices in as possible. Are we missing this? So just things like that. But hopefully it works out and we see a big jump as far as production on the field.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it for me, it's the positive is going to be keeping healthy, keeping fresh, having fresh legs for longer stretches of those full padded practice, those shell practices. I think that's going to be the biggest benefit. Looking at it on the flip side, what I could see being somewhat problematic is maybe we got a lot of new guys coming in, both freshmen and the transfers. Sometimes when you get into a practice routine, you get into a rhythm. And I don't know if like a day off might throw off some of the rhythm and potentially, disrupt some of that progress that some of those younger guys or some of those newer guys are making within the new schemes.
Sheldon, anything? Just obviously we were around the program for years. You've known it for years. You follow sports in general. Any feels on this?
No, it's hard to say because I never really laced them up, put in the pads. But I like what Brent Pry's kind of talking about as far as like, just trying to find some sort of I guess, identity. I know his press conference today, he kind of talked about those 5 principles, things like accountability, leadership. And I think he's done a good job of getting identity that isn't just like a chalkboard slogan, but actually kind of putting it into practice. And you can kind of see that, like when he said, when he first got here, like guys were okay with losing reps. Guys were okay. Teams were okay with losing battles, like that type of stuff. I mean, that's the type of culture building where you can kind of see it happen. So just to see those things kind of put into practice is pretty good to see. Now, will it translate to wins? Sooner or later we'll see. But I really like the way he's kind of gone about it, and I think he's really good at managing perception. And I think just getting the fan base excited and having things to kind of look for. So he's definitely, in terms of the PR game, he's a 10 out of 10 right there.
Always
I feel like the culture under Fuente was like it was good enough. Like it wasn't winning every rep. It was we're good enough.
And it can be that
we're
way.
getting by. So I mean, I feel like winning every rep, the competition that he's brought is definitely, I think, improved the culture around the program, and I think we're seeing that. Thomas Train actually, there was the comment that I threw on there. He talked about better evaluation, doing it every third day. Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point because you actually have a day where you can really sit and focus on breaking down some of that practice tape, seeing what you see it on the field, obviously, but you get a little bit more time to really truly dig into that practice tape and evaluate, and maybe even shuffle things a little bit as far as whether it's how you want to practice the next day or next set of days, how you want to do the rotations. So there's so much that you can really glean from that by doing 3 on 1 off. So that's a good point.
I'm going to put this up here. Jim just put it up here, and Pry actually mentioned it today. This was something their sports science individual mentioned, that going to this would be better. And I think, again, y'all went through that stuff. 3 and 1, I'm sure you get to a limit at a certain point where it's just like, I can't do anymore. Or it's, Brian, y'all play, again, y'all are on the lines. I'm losing technique now. I'm losing my technique. So,
Yeah, I mean, my fall camp was 3-a-days for the first 2 weeks. So
yeah. And, even like my son's 13, and watching him, he's playing football this year. He's in 8th grade. So even watching how they practice compared to how we practice coming up and things like that is much different. I see you, Dwight. Thank you for your comment, man. We'll see you next week. We're gonna get your perspective on this stuff as well. But even somebody like Dwight could come on and talk about how I think he put a tweet up a little bit talking about 2-a-days, or somebody asked him could they take the helmet off or something crazy like that. Like, at my son's practice, they were running routes with the helmets off. Like when I was coming up, you didn't take your helmet off when you stepped on the field. It was just different things. And the coach said, I'm trying to keep them cooler. You got so many people like Shelton that pay attention to analytics, and they get paid a lot of money to make sure people don't get hurt. Like as one parent, they asked me, have you seen the collar? They make some kind of collar that's supposed to help with you not getting concussions or something. I don't know. I haven't seen it. But I'm just saying there's so much stuff out there that, of course, we're going to see stuff different. And that's kind of why I said on my point, it's just the unknown. You know what I'm saying? I've never seen it done that way. So I ain't going to say I love it because I don't know.
We bring back the cowboy collars?
No,
it ain't a cowboy collar, though. It's not that. It's something that looks kind of like a – have you ever seen somebody put on the earphones that go around the neck?
Yeah.
So the earphones that go around your neck, it looks like that.
It's a Hans device now.
I don't know. I'm gonna look it up, and I'm gonna send it to y'all in the chat. Yeah.
All right. You search it, because I'm gonna ask y'all another thing I liked about it, and I wonder if this what did to it. Prime mentioned I don't know about that. If somebody more educated,
it's the Skelly helmets. We just actually have them that look like
they look good.
They look like our helmets, just like on top of it, instead of the more just the rough padded ones that a lot of other places have.
I'm gonna throw Jim's off here. I'm gonna put Dwight's up. Yeah, as long as we're more mentally tough during the games, I have no issue with it. The other reason I like this, and I'm wondering if this fed into that about the schedule, was Prime mentioned they're actually going to do a full game week before they do a full game week with ODU. And I'm wondering if, again, we know there are certain rules with the NCAA of how much you can practice. And I'm wondering by chopping it up like this, by giving these guys probably 5 days off going up to that last week. Okay, when we get to the 20th, you know what we're able to do? Because way we spread our days, we can go a full week. We can do our normal practice routines. We can go through everything. We can go to the Roanoke Hotel Roanoke on Friday night and almost have like that full game week where they're really focused. This is what we're going to do. Here's a practice version. I wonder if that had to do something with it. And if anybody knows the exact limitation, I know there's a limitation number of practices and days off you've got to have. I wonder if that was another reason behind it. Because for anybody, it's like prepping for something. You get a chance to do a run through and it actually doesn't count. It's going to help because you're going to be mentally ready to be like, oh, I screwed that up last week during this portion of practice. I'm not screwing that up this week. All right, a couple other things, and this is offensive line. We're not going to talk about on the depth chart. But if you heard Clements talk, first of all, Clements is just funny to listen to, just the way he talks with his South Carolina accent. Talking about Chaplin and Littlemore just literally going out there and giving everything every day. He's like, dude, he literally said, he's like, they're going out there like this is their last day they're ever going to play football, which I love to hear, especially from two young guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's big that Parker's kind of taken more of a leadership role this year. You know, when we had Caden on, he talked a little bit about it too. So those two are going to be the de facto leaders on that unit this year. So it's going to be big for him to take on a leadership role. And I like that when he's got the spotlight, he's highlighting other guys. I like that. That's a good quality of an offensive lineman right there. When you get the spotlight, you're highlighting the other guys around you. So that's big to me. And I love hearing it about Chaplin and Moore because we're gonna need those two to step up and hold down that left side of the line. I mean, especially with some of the news we got, a little bit ago, about Jesse Hansen. So we got less depth on that offensive line. So it's going to be big that those guys play a big role this year.
Was that Chaplin going against Powell in that?
That was
that spin move was pretty sick, man.
Chaplin, you better keep going out there and attacking every day. If you see somebody like that lined up across from you, Jesus Christ!
But how many of those
that spin move? You got to drive through it, man. You can't sit back on the spin move.
Beautiful spin move.
He got absolutely smoked there. Anything on the offensive line, Shelton, that you're seeing, hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I was just kind of looking at the numbers. Hansen, surprisingly enough, not a guy that people really associate as being like a stalwart of the offensive line. He was actually Tech's highest graded offensive lineman last year, according to PFF. Now, it was about league average, so it wasn't, too big of a thing. But losing him definitely hurts the depth. And you got Janzi gone as well, Jordan too. I feel like obviously with Parker, we didn't know that at the time, but obviously he was injured last year, couldn't really lift. And obviously that kind of had a huge impact on his play. So I think he's going to have a positive improvement this year. Same with Moore. Those two guys, they were so good as freshmen, but just fell off a cliff last year. Yeah, I think they'll get back to it. I think we really need Parker. Parker to me is the most important player on this O-line, especially because of the lack of overall tackle depth. So it's gonna be a little bit thin, but I feel better about the right side than I did about last year's team for sure.
Nice. All right, well, let's talk about some other depth stuff we're hearing. We saw, we'll shout him out, David Cunningham, going out there, busting it at practice, trying to put depth charts together. And, it's by law. Tally knows this. Tally had to talk to Coach Fry about it. By law, you got to call quarterback. It's cliche, I know, but it's been told, it's been said. Wells and Drones, each having times with the ones, rotating days effectively. But here's what I'll ask you. August 22nd, boys. And we'll start with Shelton. August 22nd, that bonus week, that week we're going to go into prepping. We'll probably announce a starter on the 22nd because there will be a media day that day.
I think so. I mean, I think he did it. He definitely did it earlier than Fuente did last year. It's my understanding. So yeah, I think because I know with like Fuente, it was kind of like, he wanted to wait to the absolute last possible minute. And then when he did make the announcement, it was like, in a hushed tone. It's like, okay, let's just move on. I think Pry's taking a little bit more pride, kind of making the announcement, having it be like, okay, this is our guy. So yeah, I would say that media conference is probably going to be the time that he does it.
All right. He says 22nd we're announced. Tally?
I don't know, man. I was kind of on the fence about it when we talked about it. I said I could see it kind of lingering on just to kind of throw some we don't know who's up on that first game, and then giving Purdue a little bit less to know of who's going to do it. But I think Pry, kind of what Sheldon said, though, man. I mean, with us knowing Pry and we've talked to him, I feel like he is too candid of a guy to hold something like that, and that's one of the things that the fan base like longs for. So, yeah, I think he's going to announce somebody about that time.
All right.
I think it's going to depend, and I think it's going to depend on the trend, because I think we know that from a grasp of the offense perspective, Wells is ahead of Drones at this point. He was in the spring. I think he still is at this point. Is he seeing enough practice to practice with Drones picking things up where he's not quite ready by August 22nd? That's my only question. I could see him playing some gamesmanship with Purdue and ODU, but when we really go back and look at it, there's not a lot of tape out there on Drones that's really going to, waste hours of ODU and Purdue's coaches spending time bringing down tape. There's not enough out there for them to really justify that. And any smart coach is already going to have a scout team quarterback that can run and do the things that Drones is at least running a handful of plays in that practice anyway. So I don't think there's any gamesmanship there, but like I said, my question is, how is the battle trending? Is it starting to trend where, it's ratcheting up every week in terms of the grasp of the offense? And if there is, you might give one last week to let Drones prove himself to see if he can take that role. If he's not making that progress, then I think you go ahead and name it for Wells at that point.
Yeah, I think y'all are right. I think it's announced that week, but I think there's going to be a caveat in it, regardless who it is. I think if it is Grant Wells, there's going to be the caveat of we have to take advantage of Kyron Drones' athleticism, his ability to run the ball. He's going to be used. If it's Drones, we're going to be dependent on Grant to be helping Kyron. We got to depend on him to be ready if something happens to go in and play immediately. So he's on caveat where he's not basically burying, like, that's our guy. I don't care what happens one way or the other. But I think it has to be that week, because I think what that does, it puts a firm stamp on who we are as a team. And I feel like talking with Brent Pry, like we have, he's that sort of person. He wants to, I'm going to tell the team, and I'm going to tell them who it is, and I'm going to go out here and tell the public. And we're going to be strong. We're going to go forward like that. So I feel like we do know, but who knows? He might throw us a curveball. Let's talk D-line. and if anybody was actually shocked, y'all tell me. Powell Ryland already on the ones, just got here this summer. Anybody shocked?
Not shocked.
Nah. If you're shocked, then y'all didn't see the tape. But let's talk this. Not so him. We've seen him on tape. We've seen his stats. We know what he is. But my feeling on the defensive line room in general is to go from average to above average, because I do think it was an average line last year, with the exception of sack numbers. Everything else, good at creating negative plays in the run game. What's up?
I was going to say sack numbers and the pit game.
In the pit game. That's it. But my feel is two players are key. I think Burgos is key. I loved hearing Pride talk about him today. And I think Payne's key. Because if those two guys click, you've not only got your fourth end, you've also got that guy that can go likely inside out as needed. What y'all think?
Yeah, when you talk about Payne was in that clip as well.
He was.
And to talk about him coming back from an injury, I know it's not, full game or anything like that, but to see how he moves, man, it's good to see. Coming off of an injury, to have another guy like that to throw in depth-wise. And again, we've got a lot of guys that can move and are big, We haven't seen that a lot on our lines. We're usually going after the small twitchy guys. But when you talk about Burgos, or you talk about Ryland Powell. These guys are big and physical, and they can move. So I think we'll take a step in the defensive line. I think we have an opportunity to. Of course, football, you could have injuries. We don't speak that, but I think we'll take a step forward just with some of the guys that we're plugging in.
Yeah, I mean, Price said it today. He talked about Burgos being a motor guy, big motor guy.
Mm-hmm.
And you already got a guy that's that big. If you say he's got a motor, I mean, that's going to be somebody that's going to outwork everybody around him. Seeing him, yes, they said he could push for a starting spot in the press conference today, which, perked my ears up a little bit. But
Right.
I was just hoping for Burgos to be pushing for a fourth or fifth spot on the DN position. If he's doing more than that,
Big win.
Then we cook him with something, fellas. Talking about Payne too. I mean, we've seen flashes. He got brought up in the presser last week and this week as being somebody that's working really good, making some progress, pushing some guys. If he can be that fourth guy in the rotation, that's only leveling up the interior of that line as well. And with Payne being kind of a tweener there, you could get him in at certain spots on run downs, certain spots on passing down, so he gives a little bit of versatility across the line as well.
Anything on the D-line room, Shelton?
I like having Kendricks back and Pollard a lot. They were probably our two best linemen last year. If you look at stuff like pass rush win rates. Nelson is a guy that is good to have back, but he's got to improve a lot. And CJ McCray also in there as well. So in terms of pass rush, I think it's a pretty good setup. I mean, I know the run defense was kind of hit or miss, but we've got some guys that can get to the QB, I think.
And I think that's going to be the key this year because, we were talking the other day. Did you find the Havoc stat you were trying to look up?
No, I didn't have the Havoc stat. Yeah, I didn't have the Havoc stat. I just got the sack rate. I mean, we were bottom 30 in terms of sack rate, and I think in terms of preventing explosive plays. Obviously, the run defense was terrible in terms of explosive plays. So yeah, that was probably the biggest thing that I noticed looking at the stats.
So again, it's and this was a solid defense last year. It was a solid defensive line. It wasn't spectacular, and I think and that's why I'll go back to the gentleman we first started with. Powell Ryland is that guy that can make it spectacular because y'all seen it. If you have an edge guy, the attention shifts. Everything about that offensive setup, Tally and Brian from both playing there, when you have that guy that can come off the edge, it can fly and can bend. Yeah. Every single person's like, where is he?
Yeah.
Where is he? Quarterback's looking for him. Tackle's trying to call him out. Guard's trying to know, where do I push? Where do I kick? Tight end. Tally, I'm sure there were times you played edge guys. You're like, I don't really want to go against him.
Yeah, man. It all comes down to if you have the game plan for somebody on a defensive line, changes the whole game plan that your offense has. Yep. You know what I'm saying? If you have a defensive line, I mean, and then this year is going to be big for JC because you have so many JC haters that are out there. They said he couldn't recruit. He starts getting a couple of recruits in, and then they say, well, he can't coach. So we're going to have to see, can he coach? I think JC's fine, but I'm just saying for the Virginia Tech landscape, this is a big year for the defensive line. And then shifts you to another point, our cornerbacks. Like your defensive line is a direct reflection of what they can't guard forever. You know what I'm saying? It was like a lot of times when we talk about Delane last year, him being a freshman tossed in the games that he may or may not have been ready for, it's tough to cover a long time like that, especially when you got a quarterback that's running around and they're breaking off routes and things like that. It wasn't that he just, even got beat. It's just sometimes you can have perfect coverage until that last 2 seconds, and you're hoping that your linemen get to him and cause some kind of chaos. We weren't doing that. So I feel like if we can't get to the quarterback, if we can pressure them enough where they have to throw some errant throws, then our defensive backs have a defensive backfield that can cause some chaos as well. So if that defensive line is 2 steps better than last year, then I think our defense has got something cooking.
Yeah, in that cornerback room, the first 3 are good. You got 2 guys who were previous freshman All-American. Actually, I think Canteen was a freshman All-American too, wasn't he?
I think you're right.
I think he was a freshman.
I'd have to look it up, but I'm pretty positive.
I'm
right.
pretty positive he was. And so those guys are locked. It's all about the freshmen because when I looked at DC's depth chart and I started reading cornerbacks, it's like Braylon Johnson, that freshman just got there. Dante Lovett, he just got there. And then Coach mentioned Christian earlier today. It's like, and he's in prize. I love it's the candidates. These guys are going to play. One of these guys is going to play a lot this year. And it's that whole, he mentioned, he's like, it's the constant developing, right? You know, growing pains through the first 4 games, but if you start getting better, games 5, 6, 7, and 8, the game's gonna slow down. You're gonna be better. I don't
want to cut you off, Curtis, but I want to
good.
say this right quick. Last year we did a space after the ODU game. I was livid. I was on a ledge.
No way.
Everybody was. It was over. You know,
Did Dwight came on and talked you off the ledge.
Dwight came on, but besides Dwight, he called some backup, and LJ came on as well, and he said, somebody was on there and said, Virginia Tech's not going to recruit well. You just lost to ODU. You have, recruits watching it, blah, blah, blah. And LJ said, this is what you have to do as a coach. I'm paraphrasing. This is what you have to do as a coach. You have to sell that. You have to say, we lost a couple of games. Because when we talked earlier, we talked about games that we lost by 1 or 2 points. So we didn't have enough depth. But now you brought in some players, and I'm sure Pride went to him and talked to him and said, hey, if we get you here, we can use you immediately. So you want to see some of these players get on the field and produce immediately because that's just going to be another good selling point to the next crop of recruits. Even the recruits that they just brought in or they're bringing in for the 2024 class, that's what they're saying. Hey, I know I can go here and play. Hey, I know that they're building something I can get in here and play. So when I seen those freshmen's names on there, some people get a little nervous, but I'm like, hell, shit, we ain't got nobody in front of them.
Tally had a flashback.
Let's talk about this real quick though, because we talked a ton about how much the wide receiver room has flipped. But when we look at the first 6 in this cornerback room, one of them was in the 2 deep at the start of last season.
That's true.
Yeah.
Only one. The cornerback room has completely flipped.
It has.
We had Breon Murray in our DB room. No disrespect, bro. Don't kick my ass if I ever. We had Breon Murray in there playing significant snaps, man.
Come on,
man.
The thing is, I think with Lovett, all 3, and to me, I always lean Braylon because of who Dad and that's he's going to have that mark on who Dad is, where he played. I don't until we see it, but it's that feeling of Braylon Johnson might be the 4th one. I mean, I know it's lineage, and I know it could be that nostalgia where you want the guy who was here when it originated and his son to basically take that torch and kind of replant it and say, we're back to where we were. Mm-hmm. But I'm pretty sure he started all 4 years at Highland Springs. They won 3 state titles. He's got it up here because his dad was that type of player. It's up here. So the question is, which of the 3 plays a ton, which gets a red shirt, and which is giving significant minutes on special teams and to give blows probably every 5th series to the upper guys when needed.
It's hard to say, man, because a lot of them are so, I guess they're so similar as far as body sizes.
They are.
And builds and things like that.
But they aren't underbuilt.
Right.
They're all about 180, 185. Yeah. They're not underbuilt to be corners.
Right? And I mean, like I said, I think I talked to y'all about it. When you talk about college football, like cornerback is I don't want to use the word easiest. I don't want to use the word easiest, but it's the most likely position for a freshman to come in and be able to contribute quickly, because that is pretty much a lot of athleticism. And those guys do a lot of work, and they're usually getting some high level work even in high school as DBs with a lot of these trainers and stuff. But you talk about quarterback's pretty tough to go in and just be a stud. Lineman, it's very, very rare for a lineman to come in his freshman year and have his body ready to go and have his feet ready to go and have his mind ready to go. So I wasn't really surprised that the cornerbacks that we have are making some noise. I'm just ready to get to it and see what they can do. I'm ready to see them in the games, man. I'm just ready to see them put it on. Put on the all orange jerseys, and let's go
Second
play.
game. That's the second game.
Let's go play.
By the way, my first trip down there, I've got to go to the bookstore and get an orange shirt because the only orange shirt I got is a Nike one. Everything else is maroon like this.
Nah, you need orange, man.
I know it's the orange. In fact, I got to buy one. It's like guaranteed I have to buy one.
Yeah.
All right, real quick. So those corners have been covering the wide receiver room, which we've talked about a ton, flipping over. Jennings and Lane Felton with the ones, but obviously rotating. We saw Gosnell and Holloway. And another name that from last year popped up, I'm maybe a little bit shocked, and that's Dwayne Lofton. Shelton, any shock, anything you're hearing about any of these guys or heard about any of these guys, any of the six?
Not really, honestly. I mean, I think it's pretty impressive what they've done, kind of turn that room over. Like we were talking about, I think we have to trust coaches to some degree. Obviously, when we look at Brent Pry flipping over 40% of the roster, it's because he knows that the talent level last year wasn't good enough. Similarly, you can look at what he did with the wide receiver room, getting in all those handful of guys. And the reason for that is because they just know that the talent level there wasn't good enough last year. So when we kind of assess, Grant Wells and how he performed last year, obviously he could have been a lot better. The receivers did not do him any favors. So I think the coach has done a good job of totally revamping that room in just 1 year. And obviously I trust Fontel Mines a lot with his player evaluations, and hopefully he can get those guys coached up. He was talking in a podcast a while back about how, perimeter blocking in his room is non-negotiable. Like if you want to play for this staff, you have to block, which I really like to hear because blocking to me has been a big sore spot for Tech over the past few years.
Yeah.
So hopefully he can get those guys coached up. I have a lot of faith in him. And I think that's a room where we're going to see a lot of improvement.
Yeah, I mean he's a tight end. He knows about blocking out there on the perimeter. So he's one of the best ones that could probably get that group doing that at a consistent level.
Whatever he's selling, man, people are buying. I'm buying.
Yeah,
they are.
Like, we've talked to Fontel, and you see the. First of all, I wonder who's guarding Felton in practice. Like that's a big ass dude, man. You know what I'm saying? Like we ain't had wide receivers.
What coach called him today?
Avatar.
He's like an avatar out there.
Well, the thing is like I don't think Tech fans, we haven't seen wide receivers the size that we're going to see some of the wide receivers that we're bringing in and that we have. And even with some of the skill set, I know I don't want to look too far ahead because anything can happen. Talking about the people that we have on campus, but even the wide receivers that they're bringing in, like Mekhi White just committed to Maryland because we don't got space for him. I ain't saying like he was a lock to go to Virginia Tech, but I'm sure we had a shot to get him.
He was showing us a whole lot of love until the last week or so.
People can spin it how they want to, but I mean, we've got a lot of wide receivers, and everybody knows we don't have a lot of room. So you just got the number one receiver in the state of Virginia. Then we get Chance Wiggins. I don't know exactly where he falls in. Another top receiver in the state of Virginia that's coming in, and then you see these guys that they have that are saying that the number one or the first team and second team. Like it's going to be a lot of competition in that room, and when people talk about competition, you can have competition of sorry people, and you're just gonna get the battle of the mid. You know what I'm saying? Like the people that the caliber that we have been bringing in, and what we see now, I think the best players going to have to play. The best players are going to rise to the top because you got a lot of talented people in that wide receiver room. I think it's probably our deepest unit right now.
Which, considering where we were last year, is saying something.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's saying a hell of a lot. And just in general, that room, and we talk about the growth of guys now, and we talk about Holloway coming up. Holloway obviously going to probably be fighting with punt return. Again, everything is changed. I think that's, again, we talk about being nostalgic. That is the one thing about this era of college football we're in with the portal. You're a bad team 1 year. You go make the right moves, build the right culture, bring the right people in. It doesn't take long to flip. Yeah. And that's why I kind of went after Brett a little bit and said, it ain't like we were 2-10 and got boat raced in 10 games. We got boat raced in really one. Yeah. One.
I'll say this: we didn't bring in any
UNC.
sure things, but we brought in a whole lot
of good
compared to
what we had,
the talent level that was on the roster last year.
What we had. All right, anything breaking? We didn't change conferences while we sitting here. I'll go on Twitter and check it out real quick.
Not yet.
Not yet, man.
Not yet. All right. Well, since that is it, we are going to wrap up this episode of the Boundary Corner podcast, brought to you by Main Street Pharmacy in Blacksburg. I am Curtis Wilson.
I'm Brian Siegler.
Jonathan Talley.
And I'm Shelton Moss.
Visit our website, boundarycornerbt.com, to listen to all of our episodes. Also, we do have the merchandise shop there at Boundary Corner Store, which I have been thinking about maybe making a new one. Just been thinking about some old school stuff in my head. While you're there, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube page. Shout out to all those on YouTube tonight. I know we've got quite a few been on with us the whole time. Also, your favorite podcast source, including Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Podcasts. As always, we let Jason Long, our buddy down in Roanoke, play us in. He plays us out. Check him out at his website, jasonlongmusic.com. This weekend, August 12th, he will be at the Pepperpalooza at the Grandin Village Farmers Market from 8 to noon. So check him out there if you are in the area. Check out his most recent covers EP, including The Midnight Rider you heard with the Brent Pry episode. We thank you all for always listening. And as always, let's go.
Hokies.
Panel next week. Be there, be square.